This came out when I was like 11 or 12, so I was too young to see this, but I knew like about this ending and everything when I was pretty young, years before I ever saw these movies, and I really wish I didn't. I think this ending would have blown my mind. You know, can you imagine being in the theater opening night for this?
I'm actually lucky in the sense, Patrick, that I forgot about that twist.
So you did know, but you just forgot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I'm an idiot, you know. So I'm watching it, and I'm like, it's over. I was like, isn't there? I was like, well, where's Jigsaw? Isn't there something to do with Jigsaw? And I was like, oh, fuck. And he's standing up. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. I forgot. Oh, this is so cool. I was like, what a great twist. I forgot about this. So I was flipping out for like 15 minutes after the movie ended. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a true, it's a 1-2 punch because it's two twists. It's first one is that Zapp, who we spent the last, about 45 minutes being convinced is the guy that is putting them up to this, is not actually the mastermind. And then the second one is this dude who was dead the entire time is actually alive. I guess technically there's a third twist saying that Adam had the key at the very beginning of the movie, but that twist doesn't really work for me. So I'll just recognize the two parts that do work. The sequels do retcon the whole key thing and explain why. Because, like, in theory, Jigsaw wants to have these games that are fair for everyone, that you get a second chance, you always have the ability to survive one of his games, one of his traps, right? But Adam, you can see in this movie, really didn't. I mean, his only way of survival, I guess, would have been to saw off his foot, which, maybe it's possible, but we'll see how Dr. Gordon's doing, Like, as for, like, it does not seem possible that he could have gotten the key that he had at the beginning of the movie. And the sequels kind of explain that, in a way. So we'll have to get those at some point. But anyways, what are your thoughts on Saw?
I forgot how much I enjoyed it, and I was asking myself the whole time while I was watching it, how come I hadn't been watching it for like the last 10 years or so. I thought it was a really neat horror thriller thing, and I agree with you, it's not really torture porn, but I think a lot of people think of it as torture porn.
Well, there is torture in it, but you wouldn't call something like Audition torture porn, even though there's torture in that.
No, exactly.
And the difference is, when I hear torture porn, and first of all, that's just a phrase that I don't like because it just sounds disgusting, but I think what it really means is that the torture porn label, I think, it's not just that there's torture, it's that the movie's concentrating on the torture and we're kind of reveling in it and almost kind of rooting for people to screw up and to die. And we are not doing that in this movie. We're rooting for these two characters. At least I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's not the case in Hostel because I want every single character in that movie dead,
Yeah, I really enjoyed Saw. Again, I forgot how much I had enjoyed it. I think the first time I saw this was with a very good friend of mine at his house. I must have been maybe 12, so it had already been out for about 2 years at that point. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. But do you feel, though, Patrick, like watching it again, after you know so much about where the series has gone, that it is kind of schlocky, or that it has been done so much, like stuff like that, like stuff like Saw has been done so much in society as part of like pop culture that it just feels kind of schlocky or silly at points?
Well, no, I mean, like Halloween's been done 1,000 times, and I still enjoy that movie, Not only 1,000 times within its own series, but Halloween's probably the most ripped off movie of all time, I still enjoy this movie. I think it's not 100% effective by any means. It misses its mark, in a few ways, most of which we've named, so kind of the sloppiness, a little bit of the writing. I think it's a movie that gets by on the strength of its premise, mostly. I think the whole two people are trapped in a room and have to figure a way to get out. It took a while, but Saw is the reason escape rooms are like a big thing now, right?
That's what I was going to say.
Saw is 100% part of the not resurgence, but of the increase in popularity, even though it took a few years. It's kind of like you get all these found footage movies 12 years after Blair Witch comes out, but Blair Witch was really kind of the trendsetter there, if you will. I don't know. Yeah. I think there is something just fascinating about this premise. It's an entertaining movie. It's a messy movie. It's a sloppy movie in a lot of ways, but I think most of its issues can be blamed on its low budget. This is a really low-budget movie, and it shows in a lot of ways, but also the strength of the talent in the filmmaking also is able to show.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I agree with you that I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Speaking of budget, though, what was it, $1.2 million? That was its budget. but it
Yeah,
made,
I would actually predict it to be smaller than that, to be honest, but that's what I have seen on Wikipedia. I don't know.
What's amazing to me, though, is that not only was it shot, its budget was relatively small, and it was only shot in 18 days, apparently, but it made more than $100 million worldwide. And then it says here on Wikipedia, becoming, at the time, one of the most profitable horror films since '96's Scream.
Yeah, well, I think even Blair Witch Project in between Scream and this was probably because that movie was made for about $10 probably, but yeah, no, this is, I mean, I've always said, like, James Wan made this tiny movie into a nearly $1 billion franchise. Like, yeah, he didn't really like the sequels, that's true, but it's like he made that out of this movie. It's like, I feel like this dude can do anything. He can make me like the Fast and the Furious movies. He pulled that off. He made me like a DC movie, you know, although he didn't do Shazam. You know, Shazam is a masterpiece, but
I'll agree with that.
I believe in James Wan. I think he's a very talented filmmaker, and honestly, I think Leigh Whannell, who's only directed 3 movies now, he doesn't direct this. He might have had some kind of, because he and James Wan are just good buddies, he probably had some kind of input on the directorial process, but he has directed 3 movies. He directed the 3rd Insidious movie, which was my favorite Insidious movie. Granted, I'm not a big fan of those movies, but I thought that movie was pretty good.
I think I've only seen the first
two. And then he also directed Upgrade, which came out a few years ago, which was excellent. And he directed The Invisible Man from 2020, which I thought was incredible. So I think James Wan it might not even be as good a director as Leigh Whannell. But they're both good, so, you know, can't go wrong with either of them. They're talented people.
Well, and I guess when they get together, they create a pop culture phenomenon that'll last for 20-odd years, you know?
Like Dead Silence?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm hoping we get to Dead Silence soon. I would be very curious to revisit that movie, because I don't have the fondest memories of it, but neither does James Wan, I believe.